view then was that any text was the equal of any other text. There was no choice to be made between them. Shakespeare was no better than a porn video. Middlemarch was no better than the latest work by Toni Morrison. And to suggest that one work, or text as they call them, was better or more valuable than another was demeaning to anyone, and also misleading, because you could learn about society and human nature as much from the phone book as you could from, say, Moby Dick.
It's no good looking at me like that, my dear. It's not my fault if the good Lord has seen fit to turn you into a cripple.
No literary prizes for Alf Garnett, however much he got people laughing. Campus radicalism set off thinking in society as a whole about just what was and wasn't acceptable. Imagine this on today's 6 o'clock news.
As Michael Blakey reports, India's hero was their young leg spinner, whose name I can't pronounce.
Political correctness would have had no success at all if it didn't appeal to the desire in most people to be civilized and polite. There was an awful lot of really stupid abuse of people for racial reasons and for other reasons in our society until quite recently, which has quite rightly come to an end.
What's he want now, eh?
Mr. Eddie, I was wondering if I could be borrowing a cup of sugar for my lunch.
What'd he say?
He says he wants you to give him a punch.
Oh, all right.
Attitudes once commonplace are now ridiculed by a more inclusive society. Those who embrace the change view assaults on political correctness as a cover.
Political correctness is a very clever insult because it subtly undermines all kinds of progress of every kind of tolerance and fairness and decency without quite saying, I think racism's all right, I think sexism's all right. It implies it politely, and everybody knows what it means, but that's what it means.
I'll be your sweetheart if you will be mine.
But it isn't just the right that's attacking political correctness. Whatever social progress it's brought, no one wants to lay claim to it. The cultural shift that helped do away with shows like this appears well and truly out of fashion.
The strawberry curl and the band played on.
Liz McKean. I'm joined now by the author John O'Farrell, who may be the only person in Britain willing to defend political correctness enthusiastically, we'll find out, and by Claire Fox from the think tank, the Institute of Ideas. John, when Michael Howard says in Britain today political correctness has gone mad and is driving people crazy, it's not driven you insane.
It hasn't driven me insane. I mean, Michael Howard said that it is PC, and political correctness is something that's seized on by radio, late night radio chat show hosts. Then he goes on to sound like one. I think, with the exception, with the problem that less people are listening to Michael Howard than listening to these late night radio shows. I think.
But I mean, when you hear, some of this, I heard on the radio, a Taliban spokesperson was the phrase used. I mean, sort of nonsense, isn't it? I mean,
well. There's lots of embarrassing individual examples that you can pick out, but it is important that language is used that is inclusive with people, and we can always pick on one ludicrous example, but the idea that political correctness is this terrible problem that's causing so much suffering and has to be the centre sort of policy idea for Michael Howard's run into the election seems madness to me.
Claire Fox, it used to mean just a kind of politeness, didn't it? I mean, that's really, I suppose, John's point, that you don't go around saying things which needlessly offend people by calling them effectively names which are rather slurs.
Well, that sounds a very reasonable explanation, but I'm sure all of us are familiar with that phrase, I find that offensive. And what that phrase is meant to say is, this is beyond an argument, and what worries me about what is known as political correctness is it's a way of stamping out arguments and sanitising the kind of debates that we have, and that's obviously very dangerous. However, I'd just like to point out that, it has become annoyingly cheap for people like Michael Howard to say, I don't like political correctness. I mean, if he wants to have an argument about some of the things that he thinks political correctness is stopping us having arguments about, he should just have the arguments.
But don't you wince a bit when you hear Alf Garnett use the word cripples, or when you see the black and white minstrels? I mean, they just look so completely out of date and out of time and out of touch, don't they?
Well, of course they're out of date, and I can wince. But listen, what's very annoying is that you can have the most politely sounding language on these questions, and you can have a government that treats asylum seekers like second-class citizens. So, Just because you're talking politely about people doesn't mean you're treating them any differently. So we now police in a kind of very nasty, censorious way the way that debates happen, but it doesn't mean that you've solved political problems.
That's a good point, John, isn't it?
I don't always like polite political arguments, by the way.
Okay,
No,
well, don't be polite, but I mean, it
I
is
think
a
it's
good point.
a good point that the way we use words is not the issue here. Michael Howard could have seized on far more important real issues about discrimination. Women are still paid 25% less than men in the workplace. Why didn't he seize on that? It seems strange that he talks about language. It's inept, really. It's political ineptness gone mad.
But aren't we all guilty a bit of censoring the way we think because we don't actually express certain ideas in the robust way which normally we would in Britain because we fear being called racist or sexist if you say certain things?
There is certainly a truth in the fact that we are more careful about what we say these days, but programmes like Till Death Do Part, although it wasn't Johnny Spate's intention, did give a licence to people to be insulting to black people and to think it was all right to call people offensive racial names. So it's good that those things have stopped, and it's good that we've stopped. Less builders are now less likely to shout at passing women. We should welcome those things. That's part of the political correctness culture that's coming
I'm
about.
not sure how many builders are indeed politically correct. But Claire, but you take his point. It has sort of cleaned up some things about Britain, and therefore it's not just simply language, it is also about the way we think.
Well, I think it's an attempt at behaviour modification, but I find that rather sinister myself. Just as an aside on Till Death Us Do Part, I wish there was some satires like that around today. And, you know, the fact that we're so careful, I'm up at the Edinburgh Festivals, and I would like a few shows that made me laugh as much as that. And part of the thing is that they... You know, you get the sense with political correctness that they feel as though, or that somebody feels as though they can't trust us. I mean, you can watch Till Death Us Do Part and be an anti-racist as much as be a racist. And it's not just about, of course, telling jokes, but it is about being able to examine questions with some subtlety and with some argument and to understand that things aren't always black and white. And I... personally, I'm not frightened by arguments I don't agree with. I don't want to censor them, I want to win them.
John O'Farrell, when you write anything which is humorous, aren't you going to offend somebody anyway? I mean, it's the centre of everybody's comedy,
indeed.
including your comic writing.
I regularly offend
PC, are
people.
you?
No, I don't set out to be PC, but I don't needlessly offend people in a weaker position than myself. It's fine to attack the Conservative leader or the Labour leader, but to go around needlessly offending Bangladeshis or disabled people, that is an abuse of the power that you have. And so I think that's why the political correctness is sort of necessary in those situations.
Claire Fox, just a final point. Hasn't the term kind of lost its meaning? Because people use it to refer to just about anything.
Well, that's what I started off saying. I mean, I'm not interested. I think it is interesting that it's become so useless as a phrase. But I think that we still have to recognise that there has been something that's happened to politics, which means that politics is no longer discussed openly in the way that you've implied. I think Michael Howard is being cheap, and if he wants to have an argument, let him have it openly. But I think John is being absolutely disingenuous to say that now we don't go around insulting people. But, you know, insults is not the point. This is politics, and it's called real rows, and he's got to be prepared to have them. He's just being a coward.
Real rows all round. Thank you very much. Perhaps we'll have another real row on this later. Thank you. Now, the Bush administration made it clear this month, in the words of the National